Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. Before I go on further, if you're a young child of 12 or under, to go and get your mother and father to watch the video please before you come back, and if they let you watch it, it's fine with me. We left my last video, which was called The Cycle, having discussed the magnetic planes of the Sun, to vertical planes that rotate clockwise and a horizontal plane that rotates anti-clockwise, and the two fields working together is what gives us stability in plane with the Sun in the horizontal plane. The vertical plane we have discussed gave us stability in that, showing that when the tilt of the axis was 10 degrees, as we discussed in the last video, the movement out beyond there was a period of 300 years. That period of time, driven by the width of the field, the mass of the Earth, the speed it was put on initially, and it retains the rotation of the mass where it is at 93 million miles from the Sun. That is one thing I wanted to discuss. The whole process here is happening because we had, once upon a time, two stars. We only have one, and this, from the estimate of a plate that I will insert now, was an estimate of around about 15 million years. We also discussed the fact that Earth, being the green spot here, has two rings of rotation, one on the inner ring, which is 93 million miles from the Sun, and the outer ring, which is 186 million miles or thereabouts from the Sun. And we've spoken of the rotational speed changes, both with Earth turning on its axis, clockwise and anti-clockwise, and the change of direction. My last video I put up about the cycle, I showed you the full cycle, showing you these ones here, the movement out here, then the changes here and here, and then the movement back in. And I said it was 88,000 years. That is correct, but that's only half of the cycle, because it's only going in that instance in an anti-clockwise direction in the rotation of Earth on its axis. That is what we needed to just finish off a couple of things there before I go on with the Voynich manuscript. It is relevant. I was going to make this movie earlier on, but there was such a wind blowing, it was like nothing on earth, mate. I'm not kidding, it was howling. It was blowing a gale, as they say. She lives 3 doors up, and she flew past the window here about an hour ago, so I'll have to go check tomorrow and see if she's okay. Anyway, let's get on with the serious stuff. When we spoke of this, I said to you that we come back in here and that we're tipped over. We're tipped flat on our axis again when we come back in from the outer ring. These movements here, the axis is laid flat like this, and the planet revolves around the Sun, but because it's laid flat, the rotating planes can't retain the Earth in its location, and it takes 6,000 years for it to drift out here with the momentum that's placed on it. When it gets laid over from the inner circle out to here is 6,000 years. This event going out, goes out on its own after one event there. The other, coming back this way, is a different story. It is taking multiple events. It would appear to be every 1,000 years that they are putting multiple events on the planet to move it back in here. It is in this movement back in that we change the rotation of Earth, and I'll show you how. I'll quickly get my globe. Was that quick enough? They're getting worse. If I spin it in the direction we spin, okay, we're going this way. Now when we lay it over, we go that way, we're still spinning this way, then we pick it up and we're still spinning the same way, but we're in actual fact spinning clockwise now. That is how they change the rotational spin of Earth. They don't change the direction of spin. It always spins that way. The way it's spinning now, it always spins that way. It's just that the flip of the globe, like so, creates a situation where in actual fact it's actually rotating on the axis in the system either clockwise or anti-clockwise. That is done after the end of a cycle. So in the process of coming back in and restarting the cycle from the 3,000 year mark, which is Mars' ring of rotation, which is in actual fact 24-hour rotation. I will show you something shortly that will tell you how fast it goes both ways here. Okay, because what happens with Earth, because of the mass of the planet, if it's on the horizontal plane going clockwise, it's 32-hour day. We gain 8 hours a day. The other way, anti-clockwise, once we hit it, will be 16 hours a day, and we've discussed that both cause basically an ice age. You get too much light, too much sun, too much dark, or whatever. But basically, the situation is exactly that. You also cannot exist within there or there without having a straight axis. The rotational speed will pull it straight. That's pretty much the reality. It's the same going anti-clockwise too. The Earth is still pulled up even if it's going slower. Now, I wanted to explain before I moved on that when the Earth is always rotating in the same direction, therefore any impact is always going to be doing the same thing. In other words, it's going to come from the same direction, technically. Okay, if I went back and said, okay, well look at the impacts that we've looked at, the ones that drive the Earth flat on its axis like this are always depicted as coming from the bottom of the planet. Here's a perfect example. We are taught, quite incorrectly and with their knowledge, about continental drift. There is not continental drift, it's continental shove and push. We've discussed this in videos before. This is a big comet flying up here that has created the Himalayas. That's how this gets done. It does not drift there. It's a big chunk of rock cut from Earth itself that slides back up there and has created the Himalayas. Not something that is not known by people on the planet. I will show you another one that is an upwards movement in Australia. This one here, on the bottom here, has come right across here, bounced off here, landed here, created the Gulf of Carpentaria and the highlands of New Guinea. That is how it's done. I'll show you another in our east coast, carved with a comet flying up the side here. It's still lying on the bottom of the ocean here. Here's another one that severed the New Zealand mainland here. You can see the track on the bottom of the ocean. It's still sitting here. You can see where it slid in here. Look at it. It's not hard to see that that's exactly what's happened here. I'll show you another one. These are knocking us over, putting the globe over, laying it flat. They always come from the bottom of the globe to do exactly that movement. When we want to speed the planet up, which is the last event we had, the first incident was this. This is the one that tilted the axis at the bottom of South America here, and this is the tip of the Antarctic continent. That is, in actual fact, hit into the direction. We're spinning this way because we've come off the slow process. So we've come off the slow cycle that was a 32-hour day. Needed to be sped up to be put on the unnatural cycle that we're just finishing and give us a 24-hour day with a tilted axis, so that we had a couple of thousand years starting out and a couple of thousand years as we've ended up here with it pretty livable. But like I said, the middle of the cycle, I won't go through it again. I did discuss it in the cycle video, my last video, that in actual fact was the case, that we get really mid-cycle on the one we've just finished 3,000 years ago. The sun's set in the south if you're in the northern hemisphere, and it's set in the south and stayed there for nearly 3 months. Gave you increasing light eventually as you came towards what you would perceive to be spring. That one there sped us up. The next one is an event used to speed the globe again, but it also was used to stop the axis. It is just above South America and in the Gulf. The event that hit Australia, above Australia, is these comets here. There were 4 that were created off that one that came from the bottom of South America. Broke into 5 actually, but 4 of them landed here. One of them was used in the one from Central America to add to that one to create the Mediterranean. Here are 2 more huge ones coming in on the west coast of America. This is how the Rockies were created, by 2 comets coming in here. The comets that we're told do this do not come from outer space as such. And we are told, they cut them from Earth and return them. When we look at this image, which is showing us the top of Australia, where the Gulf of Carpentaria was carved out here and pushed the landmass here, we've also seen that the other ones that all separated this landmass happened in the next event, or the event that we had to start the globe on the unnatural cycle that we've just had. These are past. How long ago I do not know. But as I've said to you, the people know that this one here, which is right in line with Ayers Rock, which is right in line or with Uluru, to those of you that are Aboriginal, I should say that should be Uluru, not Ayers Rock, that is the English name for it. Underneath Ayers Rock, or Uluru, is the atomic test at Maralinga. We come up here to the Darwin bombing, that's also on the same line. You go up the top up here, you get to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is also on the same line. People know what I'm telling them is true. It's been hidden from us for very good reasons. These are the 2 that came off and separated the east coast of Australia from New Zealand many millions of years ago, or I won't say millions of years ago, it may not be as far long back as we think. And you could say, yeah, okay, that there, circles right above it, it's Bikini Atoll, which is where the atomic bomb tests were done by the US military, the US government. I'm not saying anything about the US military or the US government at this point in time. That was a long time ago. Probably, you know, where people that are in control now would probably not have known that the case. But in actual fact, this is not something that is not known. It's all known by our leaders, and this is why these things happen here. One at the bottom of South America. That line there, if you go round, is the line that Uluru and Hiroshima and Nagasaki are all on. They're on this one, right there where that changes direction. We go to the start there and go up to the top, you'll get to 9/11, New York. It's not coincidence. I wanted to bring to your attention, this was a video by Matrix Wisdom, which is why I put that there. I just wanted to show you go and look this up and have a look at what's happened. There's been quite a few incidents over Chile only within the last couple of weeks, or probably even days. It's only got 633 likes, but it's got 7,000 views, but it's a very popular channel. And for good reason too. There's a lot of good things on there, and like I said, I freeze framed this and thought what I would do is show you this, because in this there have been incidents there where things have come out of the sky and crashed to the ground, and they've gone out there. There was no explosion though. This is the odd thing. Nobody heard an explosion, but there was damage where they landed, but they couldn't find any meteorite material because there wasn't any. That's why I'm saying to you that you do not take these things from space and fly them through the atmosphere. They put them at great speed, very fast, from within the atmosphere, and very accurately. So they don't actually see them burning up coming in, because they probably don't need to do it that way. They can propel a piece of dirt, a rock the size of Tasmania. There's nothing You probably find it, you'll go and look at New Zealand, on the bottom of New Zealand, the South Island, where I used to live. It looks like it too was slid all the way in there. They can move massive amounts of the earth, which is why they're letting us know they can. Because even though they've got to do this, they don't necessarily have to come down and hit a spot like that. They can cut it out like this and move it out of the way and have it hit the earth itself underneath on the crust of the earth. And it's not going to break in half like you get told. It's a very solid object. Otherwise they wouldn't do it this way. But I would suggest you go and have a look at that, because it does confirm what I said to you. These crash to the ground, but you don't see any meteorite material because they're not from space. They are from Earth. They cut them, put them up in the air and propel them where they have to achieve the task of rotation of the Earth around the Sun on the multiple rings, laying it flat, standing it up, speeding it up, slowing it down. That's why that process takes place. If I show you this, is one where it's had to slow us down. We know the Earth is always spinning in this direction, so it has to be one that's slowing us down. Because even if you're upside down, you're spinning the other way, but you're technically still spinning this way. So that is one that has been used to, slow us down. It was actually marked with the Tunguska event, which is up here further. It was actually that made me realise what's happened here. Was when I was realising the rotational speed issues, whether we rotated around the Sun or anti-clockwise or clockwise, or whether the Earth itself made a difference in the way it rotated. I am seeing there's no difference. So in other words, the rotational speed around as a mass around the Sun does not change whether we go anti-clockwise or clockwise. That is shown us in the Tirumali-Jane complex. But that one I just wanted to show you there is definitely coming in this way. You can see where it's hitting, and it's making one hell of a mess. The cycles that we have on the plane, or the horizontal plane of the Sun, which is very narrow, it is only 200 kilometers wide. The first incident that knocked out axis could not drive the planet up more than 100 kilometers. Can't drive it up more than 100, it could not drive it down more than 100. The narrow horizontal plane of the Sun is very, very strong. We've gone through the process of the mid-cycle being a situation where the plane, our planet, rotates around the Sun, is like so. It gets knocked off so that the planet still cycles around the Sun, but the plane of travel is on until it gets like that. It is then not crossing the horizontal plane at 33,000 miles an hour. It's actually travelling within it when it gets back here, and that is what happens, and we end up getting a very, very speedy rotation this way. The mass of the planet doesn't accelerate, whether it goes that way or that way, but the speed of rotation does. It either slows or speeds up. In our instance, we're coming up to it speeding up, which is why they come back to help us with this. If everything was going to be left as is and everything's going to be wiped out, they don't need to come here. They don't need to leave a message, or I should say, as thoroughly as they have with the megaliths all over the world, and the pyramids, the megaliths, the buildings are on from one end of the globe to the other to warn us all of what happens. And like I said, I'm not the only one that knows this. If you think I am, I would expect half the population of the world know what I'm telling you is 100% correct. I have shown you this image before in another video, and I suggested that the Voynich manuscript is not so much what it is perceived to be, but more to do with planetary motion. We've just discussed in my diagrams the two vertical planes of rotation and the one horizontal plane of rotation. They're not reflecting the very same thing. These lines within the middle here may mean that they've got to time these impacts to happen at the very point that it is between the rotating planes. That's how I would see that. How many buds do we have around here? We have 8. An 8-hour loss in one direction or an 8-hour gain in the other direction. Here, when we count these, we get 16. We get 8 of these. No matter which way we go, we've got 8 of those and 16 here. We are heading into a 16-hour day. Is that not reflecting exactly the same thing? So therefore, to make an assumption here that the text that nobody can decipher may not be text. Why is it we perceive it to be text? It's Christian Rotalo here has uploaded this, but I've actually seen this video before on another channel. It's actually Klaus Donner, who does a real lot of good work. He does some really, really good presentations, and he does doubt the history that we are taught. And I watched this many years ago and thought, wow, you know, it's really great. And I sat there not understanding any of it, not really, you know, any the wiser after having watched the video. However, today I can watch the video and I just about get to everything that he's got there, and I can just stop and say, okay, I know what's going on there. You know. On the bottom of this, I wanted to show you something, and I thought it was appropriate to put the channel up that had the video on, just to let you know where I'd seen this before. But like I said, I had seen it, and it would be probably on another channel. I wanted to bring to your attention what is on the bottom of that pyramid. So I'll show you that we've got this here on the bottom of the pyramid and these marks. Okay, and it's supposed to be Sanskrit text. So I know, you know, I'm going to question that as to whether that's the case. I'll show you the other image I've got that's rotated it back this way and gone a little closer. We know from the comet that hit in the bottom of South America that it created 4 comets. But we also know that we've got movements that we've had in the instance that the one in the South America tilted the axis, the one in Central America stopped the tilt of the axis, the one that went from Central America over to create the Mediterranean drove the planet's mass down out of the plane of the sun, the horizontal plane, and then the Australian impacts in a sequence not only stopped its process down, knocked it back, and then moved it back down again with an acceleration needed to be fit within the plane of the rotating vertical planes. Now, if this is Sanskrit, which is what we're told, I don't think it is. My interpretation of this, knowing what I know now, is that one impact has tilted our axis. The second one stopped its movement, or didn't stop its movement. It couldn't go higher. It cannot go higher. So it's crossed out the line, so it can't go up above the line. It's left with an axis that's expanding, which is exactly what this is here. It's an angle with a line through it. If you were going to say the angle, the line would not be there, and nor would that be there. So the angle, the line extending past, means that the angle is going to expand. This one here is the one that stops the downward travel. The movement downwards cannot be, it's stopped, and that process is allowed to keep moving. And that's what we're seeing here, that it stops it going down and then lets it go. And I reckon that got nothing to do with language at all. It's about the movement of the earth, exactly what it says happened in the pyramids and the serapeum are reflected in a sequence going that way. Without doubt, that is doing exactly the 4 movements in the pyramid, was an axis up, axis tilt, fired out, and then stopped, and then let go. Before I move away from that, I will bring up one more image, which is, initially I showed you this is the top of Australia and the impacts that were here, that there were 4 impacts above Australia. And that those locations, you can see the comet still lying on the bottom of the ground there. This one here is huge. Dug all that out and landed here. It's a huge one. This one here has gone across that way and landed there. And this one here slides in over the top of one of these ones that's come up from the east coast. I want to show you that because on the microscopic version of the rock I have, of the Australian mainland, prior to the land mass being removed, there's Asia, the west coast of Western Australia, round to the Great Australian Bight, and there the 4 comets there. Was that mark there in central Western Australia that I'll do once again an inserted image. That's how I found that. It was actually this rock here and another place on that same rock puts the Great Australian Bight and an indication of that there as well. So that's how I found that. It was a mark on this rock. I went to Google Earth and almost just went straight to it. But I wanted to make note of those 4 there. And if we go back to the pyramid and look at the bottom, we still have a very similar layout there with the bigger one being right in the middle there. So, I don't know, it certainly looks to me like there's some more reference in that to the comets that performed the last lot of action here, stopped its movement away and controlled how the planet left the plane of the sun 6,000 years ago. This is a very, very simple diagram. Goes without saying. But for purpose of what I want to explain, it is exactly how it needs to be. If the axis of Earth is the black line and it's straight, and I knock it over to have a flat axis, how do you know which way I knocked it? You don't, do you? You don't know whether I went that way or whether I went that way. If I add that line, what are you going to think now? Because if I saw that, I would think, oh, I've been knocked that way. That would be to me what I would think would be the case there. That I've come in, I've hit the planet, and I've caused a situation where the axis has been knocked flat like that, and that it's been moved from that point to that point. Do you not agree? I'll show you one more now. Another simple diagram. Follow how we were taught to draw an 8. We leave here, wherever it is, you start an 8 figure. Generally, you won't draw it as 2 separate circles, as a red and a green circle. You don't draw an 8 like that. If you come up, wherever you start, you'll go around the top loop, going in an anti-clockwise direction, and do the next loop in a clockwise direction. Is that not how you got taught to do an 8 at school? Is that not right? Anti-clockwise, clockwise. Are we not doing the very same thing the cycle that I just showed you does? When we move on this one here, the mid-cycle, that knocks us off the plane of the sun, rotates the plane 180 degrees and moves the Earth back in the opposite direction. So therefore an 8 and a 4, which is what the first figure looked like, completed. So we now have 8 and 4 meaning totally different things than 8 and 4. Is this not correct? Let's go on to the next one. This one here, we know when we're coming in, travelling in plane with the sun, and we incur that 180 degrees, excuse that, I couldn't get that do any better than that with that program I'm using. It is very simple, I know. But we do our 180-degree loop and then we go back in the direction we came. Now I want to go and have a close look at the text within the Voynich manuscript. Now I've just chosen this page for a good reason. I wanted you to look at the characters here. I'll zoom up so you can see this even better, because we want to get a close look at this, and this page does actually give the script in pretty good appearance in this one. It's actually pretty clear. If we were talking words, that symbol there, that symbol there, and that symbol there is exactly the same. There's another one there. Oops, sorry, no, that one, and that one are identical. There is no language that does that. There's another one here. It's got one less of those. One less of those. There's 3 of these here. We've already discussed the 8. Could very well mean, as I suggested, a complete cycle. So in other words, the motion that we've achieved. We have 4 at the start of these. We have 8 within them as well. What we're doing here is we're talking about the sequences required. The L that you see, look at it. It goes down, up and back. It's doing the same thing. It's telling you what cycle it's doing and how it's got to do it. So in other words, if you're coming up here and you're knocking the axis flat, you're talking about traversing between the planes after the cycle's finished, and how you achieve the motion of the planet. And that is what I believe we're seeing here. I believe this got nothing to do with text. It's a historical event, or a historical record of events that are used to move the Earth through the solar system. When you're getting these multiple ones like this, haven't we said that there's the instance that we've just came off a slow cycle, so therefore it needed to be sped up. So are we not seeing, when we're seeing 3 like this, that we're actually talking about hitting the globe in a direction so that in actual fact it gets quicker? There may be events within the field, and this is what I'm saying, 16,000 years, it looks to me that there's about a 4,000 year break where the planet either needs to be lifted above the plane and possibly sped up again. That's a possibility. I don't know about the speeding up bit, but certainly lifting above the plane, in that we have the problem with very, very cold weather. Within a couple of thousand years it gets very, very cold, and unaddressed for the entire 16,000 years you might end up with a snowball Earth with ice everywhere, so it's useless and nobody can live on it. So that's what I'm suggesting here, that we really, and I'm not going to sit down here and work this out, I've got a lot better things to do. There are men on Earth that would do exactly that. I'm not one of them, I'm afraid. These ones here, when we see this here, the speeding up part here, it looks to me like we've got not letters but I's, like how many it might be to actually bring us back to a straight axis here. See how you've got these 3 lines like that? And that might be relative to how quick the rotation is, or how many it takes to get the Earth to a point where we can meet the plane, which is what we've got to do now. That's what we're seeing. We could also be seeing here other issues where we're not actually hitting the Earth with anything, that moving the moon away is what I suggested as one of those things that I expect to see. I would see that is what I would say the process of that is. Now I'll just show you one other thing, because I have suggested to you before that what happens, what are we looking at here? I've said to you that they move the water, or move the ocean from one planet to another. but they have a way of moving it between one place and another. In other words, Earth to Mars. And we will go through the process of doing this. The people that live beyond this point in time. And when I say live beyond this point in time, it is my belief that they wouldn't come here and kill 4 billion people. They would be no better as people like that than the people that are here doing unspeakable things to other adults and finding the consumption of human flesh or drinking the blood of a child or whatever is certainly unacceptable, but I wouldn't say that they would come down here and kill 4 billion people, because there's only 4 billion people, 5 at most, that they've given us a number. I'm moving to get the new lesson here. This is why I want people out there need to talk. They need, and I've also said the people that are university teachers and lecturers, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a planetary scientist, I'm merely seeing what I see before me, and I do not think that we're looking at text here. There is no language that says the same word 3 times in a row after putting that in the middle of there, other than Aussie, 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 oi, 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 and I absolutely loathe that. I'm not kidding, it's like we're back in the long before sticks came around to be useful. But anyway, that's my opinion. I'm all for being Aussie, although I don't go too much on the federal government we've got, and especially our Prime Minister, who has still got his lips sealed. I would expect his Christmas might be far different than what he expected. But anyway, moving on, as you can see, like I said, there seems to be slight variations in the motion here of these as well. These, well, you could call them like a double L figure, but they're the ones like I've drawn. They're going down, they're doing a loop and coming back. They're doing exactly the same thing. There seems to be some of them drawn more at an angle. So it could be where they actually push it away relative to, relative to another one. So this one's going off to the left, this one's in the centre, this one's in the centre, one down here goes off to the right. I have shown you this crop circle before. I'll be honest with you, I've actually, there is one site I've gone to and downloaded a lot of crop circles, and I'll be honest with you, I could do another video just on the crop circle alone, explaining what I believe they mean. I will do this one because it's relative to something we've already shown you, and that is one of the pictures within the Voynich manuscript. We are looking at the inner circle here as being the inner ring of rotation, and the outer one being the outer ring of rotation beyond Mars. We've also discussed that there are 2 cycles, that if the plane moves, the plane shifts. Where does it go? It shifts around here and comes back up to the other side. We are seeing 4 on the inner cycle here because the locations that they do them also can change. So in other words, they might knock us at this point down, so we do one of the internal cycles here, where the plane shifts the 180 degrees, as we've discussed. But they could also, at the very same point, knock us that way. And then when we're going to be going that way, we're going to be spinning clockwise around the sun and spinning clockwise on the Earth to achieve this movement here. That's what I would suspect we are seeing there. When we see the movement this way, we'd be rotating around the sun anti-clockwise, with the Earth anti-clockwise, spinning on its axis, to achieve this movement out here. So that is where we're getting that movement. Laid flat, it's telling us, when I say that too, when we laid flat, we don't stop rotating around the sun. We keep rotating around the sun. They're talking about the plane shifting. And it shifts out like this. The reason I wanted to bring this up was I did discuss that when we're laid flat, the pole going out is the one that's getting the bigger wobble on it, and this is why. Because it's in actual fact the rotating vertical planes that are driving us whilst we're off the plane of the sun, because when we get shifted away from the plane of the sun, which we do every time, every one of these vents, whether it's one that lays us flat and moves us out, or lays us flat and brings us in, I would suspect that we are always off plane with the sun. The one here, which is saying it's come off the outer plane, moved in, he's got a 10-hour day, which is 2 hours longer. But it is in this one, the Earth is rotating clockwise because it gets flipped over here. And it's not until people start getting put back on here, at the end of the cycle, it is stood up and slowed, or sped, in this instance slowed, because it's going very, very quickly. But in reality, what we're seeing here is when we're getting pushed in and stood back up, this is where the flipping process of the globe is taking place here. So in actual fact, this is where it gets put back to rotating anti-clockwise on the axis right there. Right, so we know that this was rotating clockwise. And that's how we know that the anti-clockwise one is going to be even faster again than that. The other matter I wanted to explain was this cycle here and what happened in that cycle. I saw in a documentary last night a church in Scotland. There is, I did ask the man if I could use the image, but he didn't get back to me, so I won't use it without him, because it was his personal photography, I would expect to, so I didn't want to use it. But right on that point, when you get pushed off the plane, I was trying to work out what would happen, because my theory was that if you're going to be off plane with the sun, but you're still going to be rotating very, very quickly, and that you wouldn't be able to maintain off plane with the sun an axis, a tilt of the axis. But you can. You cannot on the 8 and 10, you've got a straight axis, but you can still have a crooked axis there. And once again, it's born, even though it's rotating the Earth quickly, it is still the distance between one plane and the other still permits an axis, or a tilt on the axis, okay? But what I do notice is that the precessional period is far shorter. So where in our axis tilt on the inner cycle, where we're off the horizontal plane of the sun, we're seeing that retain a 24-degree tilt. We can still achieve the same there. That is what it actually says. And the reason for that would be, like I said, the planes, albeit they're rotating quicker, but in actual fact the distance between them is extended, so it still permits the plane to be like so. But the 8 and 10 hour days on plane with the sun can have a straight axis just like it is in here. One other matter that I will discuss very quickly is the situation we have with religions. Many of them, it would be obvious that their entry into our atmosphere and somewhat control of the Earth, which is inevitable. The situation that I'm seeing is that Atlantis and such things will not be put in the control of any government that is here. The people, albeit we are told, and like I said in the movies and videos, that these people are a threat. They're not a threat to mankind at all. We wouldn't be here without them. That is painfully obvious in the message, and if they were to do us any harm, and that was their intent, there wouldn't be any messages here, none, let alone on every river rock in the world. I would assume that that's everywhere, and I can only say assume because, once again, I have not even had the respect of the Australian Geological Society get back to me to say, oh wow, Mr. Whitten, we did not realise that was on the rocks. But then I did say, I got told some months back now, it's probably over a year, don't look too closely at the rocks, Brian. So I would expect rather a lot is known and rather a lot is hidden. I think I'll finish off this video there, and say to you all, whatever it is that's going to transpire, there is no threat to good people, and those that have been led down the garden path, there is time to turn around and walk back in the other direction, no matter what religion you are. That's all from Brian Whitten and ET Art. Thanks very much. Bye bye.